may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you please introduce yourself?
Officer Snell from the Tempe Police Department.
And what type of work do you do with the Tempe Police Department?
I'm a patrol officer.
How long have you been an officer with the Tempe Police Department?
Approximately 3 years.
Back in December of 2009, how long had you been on with the department?
On my own, maybe 6 months.
So you're a fairly new officer back then?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you respond to the Tempe Police Station on December 27, 2009?
Yes.
And was that in regard to an investigation about a missing baby named Gabriel Johnson?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall approximately what time you responded to the station that day?
Around noon.
And do you know why it was that you're the one who responded? Why were you called?
Well, I just happened to get called. I was available.
At that particular time, did you know what you were being called for?
Just from the call comments, just about, if I look at my report,
Let me ask you this, Officer Snell. Did you write a report in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you have a copy of that report in front of you?
Yes, ma'am.
If you need to refresh your recollection by reviewing the report, would you go ahead and let us know you're going to do that? Look at it and then let us know when you're ready.
Okay.
And what was the reason you responded to this police station that day?
For the Logan about the about the Gabriel missing. That's why I responded.
Okay, and prior to that, had you ever investigated a missing child case before?
No, ma'am.
When you arrived at the station, who did you talk to?
Logan.
And Logan who?
Logan McQueary.
And when you talked to Logan, did he provide you with his telephone?
Yes.
And what did you do with his telephone?
What did I do with his telephone?
Yes.
We looked at the text messages that he showed me.
So Logan showed you some text messages on his phone?
Yes.
Did he also provide you anything else while you were talking to him?
Audio recordings from his conversations with Elizabeth.
And did you listen to those recordings?
Yes, ma'am.
While you were talking to him, what happened to his phone?
It died. The battery went dead.
And so were you able to continue to view his telephone at that time?
Not right at that time, but it was at 1,400 hours where he had a new battery brought to him.
So you met with him around noon and then later on about 14 hours, which is 2 o'clock?
Yes, sorry.
He was able to obtain a battery and then his phone was working again?
Yes, ma'am.
When you first arrived and met with Logan, did you look at his text messages before the phone died?
I don't recall.
Did you look at text messages after his battery was working?
Yes.
And in looking at his text messages and listening to the recordings, what was the next thing you did on the case?
We photographed the text messages and also wrote them down on field cards.
And the text messages we're talking about right now that you wrote down on field cards and photographed, who were they purported to be from?
Those ones were from Elizabeth.
Okay. At the time you photographed those text messages, were there any other text messages you photographed other than ones purported to be from Elizabeth?
No.
At some point in time during your conversation with Logan, did you have communication with Tammi Smith?
Yes, ma'am.
Where did you obtain the information to contact Tammi Smith?
From Logan. He had the phone number.
And when you contacted her, did you contact her in person or by telephone?
By telephone.
And did you record that conversation?
No, ma'am.
Did you have a recorder with you to use?
I did, but I did not record the conversation.
At the time that you talked to Tammi Smith, did she acknowledge that it was Tammi Smith that you were talking to?
As far as I can remember, yes.
What was the conversation you had with her on that day?
Just about the whereabouts of where Gabriel was and Elizabeth were.
And what did Tammi Smith tell you about the whereabouts of Gabriel and Elizabeth?
that the last time she saw them was, I'm going to check my report about the date when she saw them. It was on the December 18th of 2009, around 7 o'clock in the morning. That was the last time she saw them. And the last contact she had with them through telephone would have been on the 26th of December of 2009.
And during that conversation with Tammi Smith, did she tell you how she had met Elizabeth Johnson?
Yeah, on a flight to Boston.
And did she have any conversation with you about adopting Gabriel?
Yeah, she said that she had brought it up to Elizabeth about adopting Gabriel, yes.
And did she have any conversation with you about Logan and the adoption?
I'm going to check my report. I can't. Yeah, she said that Logan would not agree to sign any adoption papers in reference to Gabriel.
And at that time, did you talk to Tammi Smith about any communication she had had with Logan?
No. Not that I recall.
Did you have any conversation with Tammi Smith about any communication she had had with Elizabeth via text messages?
Yes.
And what did she indicate the communication was with Elizabeth?
It was about the whereabouts of where they were, the hotel.
Did she tell you she had received a text from Elizabeth Johnson?
Yeah, she did.
Did she say when she had received that text message?
The last text message she received, well, she received text messages from the December 18th of 2009 to December 26th of 2009. And the last one was on the 26th.
Okay. And did she tell you what it was that Elizabeth said in that text message on the 26th?
That she was scared. That Elizabeth was scared to come home because she thought she'd be a felon if she came home.
And did Tammi Smith tell you that Elizabeth said she was on the run?
Yes.
And Officer Snell, I'm going to ask you to just clarify. Now, you indicated that she said Tammi Smith indicated she talked to Elizabeth the last time on December 26, 2009. Is that correct?
Yes. According to my report, yes.
And what time did she tell you was the last time she got a text from Elizabeth Johnson?
The last time she got a text, I believe on the same date.
You indicated you wrote a report in this case?
Yes.
And did you write this report shortly after this incident?
Yes.
And at the time you wrote the report, did you try and document the information as you remembered it?
Yes.
And would you agree that your memory was better then than it is now?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm going to refer you to page 2, the second to last paragraph of your report. If you could look at the last sentence in that paragraph and see if that refreshes your recollection as to what time you indicated Tammi Smith said she last got a text from Elizabeth Johnson.
It was on the 27th.
So our last conversation with Elizabeth Johnson was on the 26th, and the text message was on the 27th.
Yes.
Do you recall approximately what time you were conversing with Tammi Smith on December 27th?
No, I don't.
Do you recall approximately what time you went home that evening?
7:30 in the evening.
So was it prior to you going home?
Oh, yes.
And when you talked to Tammi Smith, do you know if other officers were at her house yet when you talked to her?
I don't believe they were, no.
Okay. So sometime between before other officers arrived and you went home, you talked to Tammi Smith on the phone?
Yes, sir.
What did Tammi tell you specifically about Logan and his relationship with Elizabeth Johnson?
That Logan caused Elizabeth stress, and that Elizabeth felt that Logan was threatening to take Gabriel away from her. And that he was verbally abusive.
Did Tammi tell you anything about Elizabeth and funding her trip?
She said that she believed that Elizabeth sold her dogs to fund the trip.
And so Tammi told you on December 27th that Elizabeth had sold her dogs?
Yes.
After you talked to Tammi Smith, did you talk to Logan about Tammi?
Yes. Yes.
And after talking to Logan, did you look at any additional text messages?
Yes, Logan provided text messages from Tammi to him.
And, Your Honor, may I approach?
You may.
Now you have before you what's already been admitted into evidence, exhibit number 38. Can you take a look at that? Do you recognize what's in that exhibit?
Yes.
What are those?
Those are I copied down the text messages that Logan had received from Tammi
And you copied them down on what?
on these field cards.
Okay, what's a field card?
Just something we write on when we're interviewing people. Just paper. Basically gives the name, the date, when you spoke to people.
And Officer Snell, there's been some inconsistent information on times and dates I'm hoping you can clarify for all of us. Did you write down the dates that those text messages were on Logan's phone?
Yes, I wrote them down on the field cards as well as the report.
And now specifically the dates that you noted for Tammi Smith's text messages, what were those dates?
December 22nd of 2009.
Okay, and did you also write down the times?
Yeah, it started at 13:33 and they end at, 1:33 and they end at 2:38, I believe.
And so there were a date and time stamp from December 22nd, 2009.
Yeah.
Now we heard some conflicting testimony, and like I said, I think you can clarify. Did you look at some phone records in this case?
Yes.
And in looking at those phone records, did you see what appears to be the text messages that you have there in front of you?
Yes.
And those phone records, do they indicate a date of December?
Objection, Your Honor, foundation for the phone records and relevance.
If he saw and he can testify as to what he looked at from a foundational perspective, you can voir dire. We talked about the phone records in terms of identifying them previously.
Your Honor, actually, may I have just a moment with defense counsel? I talked to Ms. Phillips about this, but
Okay.
not necessarily Mr. Lee.
All right. That's fine, Judge.
Did you?
Are you withdrawing the objection?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead and ask the question.
So did you look at some phone records that we showed you today?
Yes.
And those phone records were dated December 28, 2009?
Excuse me?
December 28th, 2009,
December 28th, 2009?
were the phone records
Yes.
dated December 28th? And did they appear to contain the same information that's in those text messages?
Yes.
And did they appear to be sent to a phone number starting with a 480 area code?
Yes.
And did you attempt to locate whose phone number that was today?
Yes.
And whose phone number did you determine it was?
Detective Frank Aguilera?
And so did it appear from the phone records that those text messages were sent to Detective Aguilera on December 28, 2009,
Yes.
and not to Logan?
Yes.
But from your looking at Logan's phone, they indicated they were sent to Logan actually on December 22nd, 2009?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I move to publish exhibit number 38.
Any objection to publishing it? You may publish it.
And Officer Snell, I'm showing you one of the cards that's in exhibit number 38. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
Did you number these cards?
Yes.
Okay. And how did you number them?
The way, chronologically, the way they came in into Logan's cell phone.
So number 1 would be the first card you numbered.
Yeah.
And I'm pointing to a little number 1 with a circle on it on the card. Is that the number 1?
Yes.
And so this is the text message you first saw.
Yes.
Could you go ahead and read that for us?
It says, "Can we get together tomorrow morning to talk with you and your dad? I'm afraid she'll be gone forever because she doesn't want."
And I'm going to go ahead and turn the card over for you.
It says, "Want to go to jail for kidnapping." December 22nd, 09.
And now I see a number 2 with a circle on that. Is that a second text message?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you please go ahead and read that?
"Doesn't trust you or your dad. Only way she'll come back is if my attorney faxes the signed papers to her so she won't get in trouble. And Gabriel be with us."
And what time and date did you notice?
December
on that?
22nd, 09, 1:35.
And Officer Snell, I'm going to show you a second card that's in exhibit number 38 that has a 3 with a circle on it. Would you read that one to us?
It says, "I will tell her this. I understand. We will pray about it. I hope she does the right thing. Let us know if we can do anything. God bless." And it's 12/22/09 at 2:01 p.m.
And Officer Snell, I'm showing you has a number 4 on it. It's the back side of that same card. Would you please read that?
It says, "She will be in court when she's supposed to be. She's in touch with the court. She just needed to get away from all the stress and have a happy Christmas." 12/22/09, 2:38 p.m.
Now at the top of that card, there's the name Tammi Rich on that. What is that?
It's just for my notes.
Okay.
So,
Where did you get the name Tammi Rich?
I don't recall.
Is that a first name and a last name or 2 different names?
Rich. I don't recall where I got Rich off the top of my head.
Okay. But do you know if that's like a first name and a last name or 2 different names on there?
I don't recall at all.
After you spoke to Tammi Smith and then Logan the second time, did you participate in a briefing?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you participated in the briefing, who was present? Generally, I don't need specific names, but just
The
generally.
detectives and sergeants.
And did you tell them what information you had learned from Tammi Smith and Logan McQueary?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you provide to them the recordings that you'd obtained from Logan?
Yes.
And the text messages you'd obtained from Logan as well?
Yes.
Did you have anything else to do with this investigation other than what we already talked about on December 27, 2009?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cross-examination, Mr. Lee?
Yes, Justice.
Officer Snell, remind me, how long you been doing this?
About a little over 3 years.
A little over 3 years. What'd you do before you were an officer?
I was a teacher.
Well, you know what? What's easier, teacher or officer?
About the same job.
About the same job. That's what I figured. All right. Now, you got a call out about a possible missing baby. Is that what the call was?
As far as I remember, yes.
And where did you go to physically? Where did you go?
120 East 5th Street in Tempe. The
120.
headquarters.
What is that? Is that
It's
a
the police.
Let me finish his answer.
Hold on, let me-
28.
Let me hang on for 1 second. You need to make sure that he finishes his question before you answer. And Mr. Lee needs to make sure you've completely finished your answer before he starts asking the question again. We can't have you talking over each other. The court reporter can't get it down. So both of you need to slow down a little bit. Go ahead.
I'll slow down. Good. Right. I forgot what I asked, so I'll start over again. What was the residence like? Was it a residence? Where was it?
No, it was at the police headquarters.
Okay, so was there you were there already?
No.
Okay.
I responded to there.
Just for my own information, why didn't somebody who was there already talk to?
There is
Mr.
nobody
McQueary?
there,
Oh, there's
usually. Except for detectives, there's no patrol officers at the headquarters.
Okay. So you responded to the headquarters to talk to Mr. McQueary?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Where was he waiting?
In the lobby.
So you went in the lobby. Did he identify himself? Did you ask, who is he? I mean, how did that happen?
I showed up and, I was looking around for somebody, and then he said, I'm Logan McQueary, and I was the one who called. That's how the conversation started.
Okay. Now, when you arrived, you knew from doing this for a little while that you were going to have to write a police report on this, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you went to the academy?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in the academy, you learned to write police reports?
Yes.
Okay. You learned that they needed to be complete?
Yes.
And you learned that they needed to be accurate?
Yes.
And you learned that they needed to have all the important details?
Yes.
And that's because you know that lots of people rely on police reports, correct?
Yes.
Prosecutors rely on police reports?
Yes.
Defense attorneys rely on police reports?
Yes.
Judges rely on police reports?
Yes.
As well as juries, they also rely on police reports, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you've used your police report today, in fact, to return to the day that this happened, correct?
Yes.
Now, you always write your police reports so that they're complete, accurate, and have all the important details.
Yes.
In fact, you wrote this police report that way.
Yes.
Now, when you went and you started talking to Mr. McQueary, he was concerned about something, correct?
Yes.
What was he concerned about?
The whereabouts of his child and Elizabeth.
Okay. He wanted to know where Elizabeth Johnson was, and he wanted to know where his son was, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You knew this was an important call.
Yes.
Okay. Now, Judge, if you don't mind, I'm going to grab this little, it's not going to be sliding on one of this little whiteboard and bring it up here. As inartful as that was, here we go. I'll attempt to set this up so everybody can see it. Now, we saw a little bit about the notes that you took. And those were just, 3x5 cards with some lines on them that you write down impertinent information?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and those notes pertained particularly to text messages from Logan McQueary's phone.
Yes.
Okay. And those text messages you believed came to Logan McQueary from Tammi Smith.
Yes.
Okay. There was another set of text messages on there, correct?
Yes, sir.
Who were those from? Where were those text messages from?
Elizabeth Johnson.
Elizabeth Johnson. And they were particularly concerning to you.
Yes.
Okay. Why were they so concerning to you?
Just the content of what was in there.
Content. Let's talk a little bit about the content. Do you have your police report there in front of you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You turn to the section where you've got, I believe it's on page 2 of your report, where you've got notated what the text messages are from Elizabeth Johnson.
Yes.
Let's look at the first one that you've got notated there. What does it say?
It says coward bitch, sent on 12/27/09 at 12:41 hours.
Okay, Elizabeth Johnson. It says coward bitch. Okay. Judge, may I approach the witness?
You may.
They're showing this for demonstrative purposes, Your Honor. What does that say?
Coward bitch.
Is there a date on there?
Yeah, 12/27/09.
You have a pen with you?
Yeah.
Did you write down the time that you've got corresponding to that in your police report on the bottom of that document? Judge, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Would you like to publish this for demonstrative purposes to the jury?
Can you clarify who the message is?
Who is this message from?
Elizabeth Johnson.
Elizabeth Johnson.
To
who?
Logan McQueary.
Logan McQueary.
any objection to him publishing that?
Yes, Your Honor. I object because there's actually evidence.
Well, I was going to ask, is it contained in an exhibit?
Judge, it is contained in an exhibit. I'm doing this for demonstrative purposes only. The jury would be well advised to look at any evidence that's already in, but I think this makes it easier to show what's happening.
Let's identify. I'm sorry.
Excuse me.
Let's identify what exhibit it's in. I'm okay if it's in an exhibit, simply taking part of it and showing for demonstrative purposes that to the jury. Is it an exhibit that's in evidence?
Your Honor, his FI cards that you wrote down the information is in evidence. It's exhibit number 56. He also took photographs of the text messages, which are not in evidence, but they are marked.
Okay. So Mr. Lee's opting not to utilize the exhibit itself, but we know that what he's using is in exhibit 56, which is in evidence, correct?
Your Honor, I'd have to compare what he has to make sure it matches what's in
I'll be
evidence.
happy to show them individually to the county attorney as I use them.
We'll show them so she can see it right now. My intention is if you're using something straight out of an exhibit that's in, you can put it up for demonstrative purposes as long as you're not changing it in any way. If it's reflected in the exhibit, you can do it that way if you want.
Your Honor, may I grab the exhibits to compare?
You may.
Yeah, the one is in front of the box.
You can go ahead and grab it.
Your Honor, my only objection was the punctuation is a little different. If the defense counsel wants to identify that he added the punctuation, we appreciate that.
Judge, I put quote marks around all of them. That's fine. I'd be able to tell that to the jury.
Okay, is that the only difference, the quote marks?
Yes, Judge.
Okay, so the jury's clear. This is coming from Exhibit 56. It's part of the text messages that are in Exhibit 56. I'll let you publish to the jury.
Thank you, Judge. Judge, if I could get the overhead projector.
We can do that.
And, officer, this is the first text message you noted in your report. It said coward bitch, right?
Yes, sir.
And that's from Elizabeth Johnson.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry. For the record, these are not in exhibit number 56. They are in exhibit number 194, which have not been admitted.
Okay.
I'd be happy to go through the rigmarole if we need to.
I would have no objection to the admission of exhibit number 194.
I'm not sure what you're defining as rigmarole, but
I'd be happy to lay the foundation.
okay.
Approach the witness, Your Honor.
Well, for one minute, she's saying that she's okay with admitting Exhibit 194. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Do you want to admit 194?
Yes, Judge. We'll
Okay,
stipulate to
so
that.
Exhibit 194 is stipulated to, so it's admitted. 194 is in.
Thank you, Judge.
Okay. So what we're looking at now is from Exhibit 194, correct?
Yes, Judge.
Okay, go ahead.
Look at your report. What's the next text message that you see from Elizabeth Johnson?
It says pathetic loser. It's sent on 12/27/09 at 12:41 hours.
Sorry, sir.
Excuse me, at 12/27/09 at 12:41 hours.
Judge, I'm going to approach the witness a number of times. Do you mind if I just approach and have him?
You can.
Approaching the witness, showing him what's the defense is used for demonstrative purposes. What does that say?
Pathetic loser.
Can you put the time that was reflected in your report that was sent?
It doesn't contain everything that's in the exhibit. That's my only concern about what's on here.
Okay, so we're taking a part of what's in the exhibit?
Yes.
Wouldn't it be a fair representation to put everything that's in it versus part, or you can...
Judge, I didn't put everything in it because it wasn't in the police report, but I could approach the witness and have him read in what the rest of it says and then write it on here.
Okay, or we can just show it to the jury as is, it's in, but if you want to go through that exercise, you can.
I could. I'd like to, Judge.
Go ahead.
Well, let me just have him say what the rest of it is, then I'll publish this. Approach the witness.
You may.
I'm showing what is marked as State's Exhibit 194. I'm showing it to the officer. Can you read? I know it's a little blurry on there, but could you read the entire text?
It says pathetic loser, run to daddy.
Slow down and speak up, please.
Pathetic loser, run to daddy.
And that's from Elizabeth Johnson?
Yes.
What's the next text message?
It says, fine, don't talk to me, asshole, but you will never see Gabriel again. I made sure of that, and you can spend the rest of your pathetic life wondering about him. Sent 12/27/09 at 12:41.
Hey, do me a favor, same thing, just write down the time on the second page that it was received. Is that a fair reflection of what you just quoted?
Yeah. Yes.
Judge, I'd like to publish this. Officer, while I'm putting this up, could you read the next message?
You will never find me. I'm already boarding a plane out of the country. When I'm safe, I'll email you the exact location of dead Gabriel's little blue body. If it says sent 12/27/09 at 12:41.
And that was Elizabeth Johnson sent that, correct?
Yes.
If you could do me a favor, just make sure that says the same thing and put the time. Got one more. Could you read the last one?
It says, if the garbage don't come first, well, I'm done with you two fucks. This is what liars like you deserve. Sent 12/27/09 at 12:41 hours.
That Elizabeth Johnson as well?
Yes, sir.
Can you do me a favor and just put the time down on there? Now, there was another set of text messages that you saw, correct?
Yes, sir.
And we've talked about those already. Who are those from?
Tammi Smith.
Tammi Smith. All right, if you could do me a big favor, and we saw your note cards already, read that first one that you've got in your report from Tammi Smith.
It says, can we get together tomorrow morning to talk with you and your dad? I'm afraid she'll be gone forever because she doesn't want to go to jail for kidnapping. It says sent 12/22/09 at 13:33 hours.
Okay, now could you read the next text message?
Yes, sir. She doesn't trust you or your dad. Only way she'll come back is if my attorney faxes the signed papers to her so she won't get in trouble and Gabriel be with us. Sent 12/22/09 at 13:35.
just put the time down, that'd be great. All right, could you read the next one, officer?
I will tell her this. I understand. We will pray about it. I hope she does the right thing. Let us know if we can do anything. God bless. Sent on 12/22/09 at 14:01 hours.
All right, if you could put the time down on this one as well. Thank you, officer.
Yes.
All right, well, I'm putting this up. Same thing. I think that's the last one we got there.
It says she will be in court when she's supposed to be. She's in touch with the court. She just needed to get away from all this stress and have a happy Christmas. Sent 12/22/09 at 14:38 hours.
All right, last one, I promise. Now, let's talk about these text messages. What jumps out at you between these two? Is there a different tone?
Yes, sir.
Is there a different tenor to these two?
Yes, sir.
On this side, Tammy, how many curse words are in there?
None.
How many threats are in there?
None.
Okay. On this one, is there a sense of concern?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Concern for Gabriel.
Yes, sir.
There's an expressed concern for Logan.
Yes, sir.
Okay. On this side, is there curse words?
Yes, sir.
Are there threats?
Yes, sir.
Is there an admission to killing a child?
Yes, sir.
Based on these two texts, that you collected for evidence, correct?
Yes, sir.
There's a huge difference.
Yes, sir.
You were concerned about Elizabeth Johnson.
Excuse me?
You were concerned about what Elizabeth Johnson might have done.
Yes, sir.
You were deeply concerned about what Elizabeth Johnson might have done.
Yes, sir.
Now, you called Tammi Smith, and we heard a little bit about that on direct, correct?
Yes, sir.
If you don't mind, I'm going to walk you through it a little bit. Now, where did you get the number from?
Logan.
Okay, Logan gave you the number, and he presumably got it from Tammi.
Presumably, yes.
Because he had text messages from his phone.
Yes.
Okay. Now, you called up Tammi, right?
Yes.
She answered the phone.
Yes.
You identified yourself.
Yes.
You said you were an officer.
Yes.
And you worked for the city of Tempe.
Yes, sir.
And you asked her a series of questions.
Yes.
Okay. The reason you asked her these questions because you wanted to know about Gabriel.
Yes.
And she answered the questions that you asked her.
Yes.
One of the important questions that you asked her is you asked her, where had she met Elizabeth Johnson?
Yes.
What did she tell you?
On a plane. On the way to Boston.
Okay, she on a plane on the way to Boston. Okay. Tell me a little bit more about that conversation.
I have to refer to my report.
It's on page 2 of your report. Looks like it starts at 1, 2, 3, fourth full paragraph from the bottom, if you go from the bottom. Did she say that she wanted to adopt the child?
That she wanted to adopt the child?
Yes, Gabriel.
Said that Elizabeth expressed interest in having Tammy adopt Gabriel.
Yes. So Elizabeth had expressed some interest in Tammy adopting Gabriel. Okay. Now, you were concerned about Gabriel, and you knew that the last person that had Gabriel, that you assumed had Gabriel, was Elizabeth Johnson, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you asked the logical questions that I think all of us would ask of Tammy. What do you know about Elizabeth, right?
Yes.
Okay. What did she tell you about that?
Specifically?
Yeah, specifically. When was the last time she talked to Tammy?
Spoke to Tammy?
Yes.
Would have been on December 26th of 09.
So December 26th of 09 was the last time that she talked to Tammy. Where did she think Tammy was? Where did she think Elizabeth was?
In, I believe, Texas.
So Tammy thought Elizabeth was in Texas. And the last time that she talked to Elizabeth was on the 26th. Okay, she had text message contact with her on the 27th, correct?
Yes.
Now, Tammy gave you all the answers that you asked for.
Yes.
She talked to you as long as that you wanted to talk to her for.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you remember when you talked to Ms. Phillips?
Yes.
Do you remember doing an interview with Ms.
Yes.
Phillips?
Yes.
She's much easier to remember than me. So you talked to Ms. Phillips, and she talked to you about your impressions of Tammy. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
And your impression at the time you talked to Tammy that she was being truthful.
Yes, sir.
And that she was being helpful.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So she gave you the information that she had at hand, correct?
Yes.
Now, in your complete and accurate report, I don't see anything in here about her refusing to talk to you.
No, sir.
Because she didn't, right?
No, sir.
Yeah, I don't see anything in here about her not answering all the questions that you asked her. That's because she answered them all?
Yes, sir.
And I don't see anything in this report about her being evasive. That's because she wasn't evasive.
No, sir.
Okay. I don't see anything in here in your report about her being belligerent. And that's because she wasn't belligerent.
No, sir.
Your impression at the time is that she was helpful and honest.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you talked to Mr. McQueary about his relationship with Elizabeth Johnson, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you talked to Mr. McQueary about problems he may have had with Elizabeth Johnson, correct?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Okay. You talked to him specifically about the possibility of Elizabeth Johnson and violence towards Gabriel, baby Gabriel.
Yes.
Okay. And he related an incident to you, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And he told you that he saw Elizabeth shake the baby.
Yes, sir.
And that gave you some concern considering these text messages.
Yes.
Now, when you talked to Miss Phillips, you also talked about what you thought Tammy was concerned about, correct?
Yes, sir.
And your impression is that she was concerned about Gabriel.
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Redirect, Ms. Andrews?
Yes, thank you. Move this so I can see you. Officer Snell, what specifically did Tammi Smith say to you about Logan and the adoption papers?
Specifically, that he wouldn't sign them?
So Tammi Smith told you that Logan wouldn't sign the papers.
Yes, ma'am.
And she made the statement to you on December 27, 2009?
Yes, ma'am.
And did she tell you that it was her intention to adopt Gabriel?
Just look at my report.
If it refreshes your recollection, just let us know when you're ready. Mr. Snell, if it helps you to refresh your recollection, I'll direct you to page 2, the 5th paragraph down.
Okay. Okay, yes, it's talk about Tammy agreeing to adopt Gabriel, and she retained a lawyer to do so.
And so Tammi Smith told you on that day it was her intention to adopt Gabriel?
Yes.
Defense counsel asked you what Logan told you about Elizabeth Johnson.
Yes.
What did he tell you about Tammy? And if it refreshes your recollection, I'll direct you to page 3, the 3rd paragraph of your report.
Judge, your recalls for hearsay.
Your Honor, defense counsel opened the door by asking about his hearsay statements about Elizabeth Johnson.
I'm not sure that opens the door to those particular statements. I don't think it opens the door because the Elizabeth Johnson statements from my memory were already there. And I don't think it opens the door as the statements about the defendant. So I'm sustaining the objection.
If I could just make a quick record, the statements were already, if you're indicating the statements about Elizabeth Johnson are already there, it's because Logan testified. He also testified to these same statements that I'm asking about.
Okay, and I guess that's the question. Did he already testify as to the statements you're attempting to elicit? Mr. Lee, aren't those out, at least according to Ms. Andrews there?
If I might ask her where in the police report she's referring to, what page?
Go ahead, John.
That is correct. This has come out on directive of Logan McQueary.
Okay, then the objection's overruled. You can ask the question. Do you want her to ask the question again?
Yes, sir.
A little bit.
Yes.
Go ahead and ask the question again.
What was it that Logan said about Tammi Smith? And I'm referring to, if it refreshes your recollection, to page 3, the 3rd paragraph of your report.
He stated that he had messages and conversations that were in reference to him signing adoption papers.
And what else did he tell you?
He said that he was being pressured by Tammy to give up his parental rights over Gabriel.
No further questions, then.
Thank you. Does the jury have any questions for Officer Snell before we let him go? Doesn't look like it. May this witness be excused. Ms. Andrews?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes, Judge.
Officer, you may step down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that takes us pretty much to the end of the day. So we're going to take our evening break. We'll be back tomorrow, hopefully right around 10:30 would be my hope in terms of my calendar tomorrow. If we're a little late, bear with us. And, you know, I say that with a smile. I want you to understand we do respect your time, and it's important that we use your time wisely. Many times during trial when we're taking additional time, we're actually talking about things that will streamline the presentation to you and make it easier and faster. So while I know sometimes you have to wait, and I'm very sensitive to that, the goal is to keep you waiting for as little time as possible, and I think that's what we're doing overall. So if we're a little late, bear with us. We will get going. Until then, remember the admonition, and we'll see you tomorrow at 10:30.
All right.
Please be seated, everyone. Okay, we're outside the presence of the jury. Thank you for moving that one direction or the other. Okay. Anything we need to talk about from anyone's perspective before we end from the evening?
Your Honor, just before I forget, we need to replace Exhibit 50.
Okay. by way of reminder, Exhibit 50, I think Council examined Exhibit 50, found that it contained some things that probably shouldn't be on there, some extra material. We've gone back in, and there's an agreement between Council now that Exhibit 50 currently represents what Exhibit 50 should have. So we're going to replace the old Exhibit 50 with a new Exhibit 50. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Phillips, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so we're replacing Exhibit 50. We can go ahead and do that. Anything else that we need to talk about from the state's perspective?
No, Your Honor.
From the defense perspective?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about tomorrow in terms of our witnesses. In fact, let's talk about tomorrow briefly. There is a motion that was filed. No, it needs to be on the record. It's a motion to quash subpoena, or in the alternative, motion for protective order. We're not going to argue it right now. It was filed by the Arizona Attorney General's office on behalf of Judge McVeigh, seeking to quash the subpoena. What I want to establish, first of all, is we're not planning on calling Judge McVeigh tomorrow. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, and what I'd like to do is set a time tomorrow, and we could talk about that maybe 3:30, where we can, to the extent there is an issue that needs to be discussed relating to this motion, meaning there's not an agreement already between the state and the Attorney General regarding the scope of Judge McVeigh's testimony, I can resolve any issues with respect to Judge McVeigh's testimony, and we'll give notice and allow the Attorney General to be present. That's what I intend on doing. Anyone have a problem with that procedure?
No, Your Honor. I did talk to Mr. Nolan yesterday from the Attorney General's office and tell him we were talking about arguing that tomorrow afternoon, and he just indicated he could hop on the shuttle and be here in about 15 minutes whenever we needed him.
Okay, so we're going to argue this motion, and again, it's the motion to quash subpoena, or in the alternative, motion for protective order. We're going to argue that at 3:30. We'll give notice to Mr. Nolan. And Ms. Andrews, I'd appreciate it, even though we'll give notice, if you could give him a call and let him know that we're going to be arguing to make sure he's here, and then we'll discuss it at that time. So we'll end a little early tomorrow. Okay. Anything from the defense perspective? Okay, off the record. Who are we calling tomorrow?
I believe we're calling.
Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Much to my surprise, the clock in this courtroom is actually 45 minutes fast. It's really 10:30 right now. Actually, it's not. As you know, we've had to take care of some matters, and we've taken care of them. Before we start again, and I apologize for starting late. Before we start again, has anyone had any issue with respect to any exposure to media coverage or anything else about this case? I'm getting no affirmative nods. That's good. Good job. Keep it up. Stay away from the news, please. Okay, so we're ready to get going now. We left off with the state getting ready to call its next witness, so the state may call its next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls DeeAnn Ayala. Ayala.
Ms. Ayala, come on forward. Eileen Keir is going to swear you in, so come on, right here.
Could you please spell your name for the record?
DEE, capital ANN, AYALA.
Thank you. Please raise your right hand. You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
And you're going to come over here. Watch your step. You're going to end up sitting next to me. You got to go across the front. That chair is hard to maneuver. There we go. And Ms. Andrews, you may proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Is it okay if I call you DeeAnn?
Yes.
Would you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm DeeAnn Ayala.
And DeeAnn, I went ahead and poured you a glass of water there, so that's a fresh glass that I poured for you.
Perfect,
Okay?
thank you.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about how long you've lived in the Phoenix area?
I moved here about 5 years ago from Portland, Oregon.
And do you have a family?
Yes, I'm married and I have 2 children that live here with me.
And what is it that you do? What do you spend your days doing?
I'm a wife and a mother. I stay home.
So you're very busy.
Yes.
You indicated that you lived here for about 5 years in the Phoenix area. When you moved here, what was the reason you moved to Phoenix?
For work, my husband's work, business.
And when you moved here, did you know anybody in the Phoenix area?
No, we didn't.
At some point in time, well, let me ask you, what's your husband's name?
Sam?
At some point in time, did you meet a person by the name of Tammi Smith?
Yes, I did.
And do you see her in the courtroom today?
Yes, I do.
Could you please indicate to us where she's sitting and describe a little bit what she's wearing?
She's over there in the middle wearing leopard.
Your Honor, may the record reflect identification?
It shall so reflect.
Why don't you tell us a little bit how you met Tammi Smith?
I met Tammy in this, it would be spring of '08. This is really vibrating.
Okay, if it's buzzing a little bit, we can turn it down for you. We have that balance of feedback, buzzing, and making sure that we can hear you. So
Okay.
I'll move the mic down a little bit. I can do that actually from here, so I'm moving it down. So hopefully that'll be a little bit better for you. Go ahead.
I met Tammy the spring of '08 professionally.
And how long was that after you had moved to the Phoenix area?
We moved here in '07. So, I mean, it had been, well, I guess I met her in '07, I believe. We moved here in '07, so it would have been actually '07, '08. I don't really remember because I met her at an office that I had been visiting. So actually it would have been later. It would have been '08.
And do you recall how long you'd been living in the Phoenix area when you met Tammi Smith?
At least 6 months.
And at the time that you met Tammi, did you have very many friends or know very many people?
No, I did not.
You said you met her professionally. Explain how you met her professionally.
I met her at my doctor's office, and I was introduced to her for physical ailments that I was having that they thought her services would be beneficial for me.
So was she working at the doctor's office?
Yes,
In what capacity?
as a hydrotherapist.
Okay. Can you explain a little bit what a hydrotherapist is?
It was to help with internal and intestinal issues.
And so you saw Tammi Smith professionally for hydrotherapy.
Correct.
And how often did you see her professionally?
2 to 3 times a week for a while, and then it would go down, and that was at the beginning, and then it would go to like twice a week, and then it was once a week, and then it was on a as-needed basis.
And when you saw her, did you see her at your doctor's office or somewhere else?
At the doctor's office.
Your
And then
doctor's
she
office?
had another location also in Sun City that I went to, I believe, twice. And then another location that I would see her occasionally at.
When you were spending, well, let me ask you this. How much time did you spend with the defendant on the occasions you saw her professionally? Approximately
On
how
an
long
average,
that
about
was?
45 minutes.
And DeeAnn, I'm sorry, there's a court reporter sitting in front of you. She's going to take down what I say, and she's going to take down what you say. So if you could let me finish the question, and I'll let you finish the answer.
Okay.
We'll try not to interrupt each other, okay? So I'm sorry, how long did you say?
Average about 45 minutes.
Okay. Are you nervous?
A little bit. It's kind of cold.
It is cold.
I'm getting over a cold also, so.
Okay. So you'd see her on each occasion professionally about 45 minutes?
Correct.
During those time periods, did you ever have any personal conversation?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it started off, from our first visit, talking about why I was there, what was going on with me, that I had just moved here, and from the very first visit, we started talking personal.
And did you just talk about you personally, or did you also talk about the defendant as well?
No, we talked about her as well. She had, I believe, just gotten back from a trip to Africa. We talked about her kids, or her, all of her kids and her family and her business. We talked about a whole bunch of things.
You say she talked to you about her kids. What kids did she talk to you about?
Her daughter Hannah, that her and her husband had adopted. And she had also mentioned the other children that she had that I believe lived in Tennessee.
Do you recall how many children she talked about?
3 or 4.
At some point in time, as you're getting to know the defendant, do you become more than just a professional acquaintance with her?
Yes.
Would you categorize your relationship with her at some point as a friendship?
Objection, BD.
Overruled.
Yes, we became friends.
Tell us a little bit about how that happened.
As like I said, we spent easily 45 minutes each session together, and we found that we had similar things in life, medical issues specifically, and the whole story. Why I was there and what she had went through medically. It was the same. So that that bonded us in that matter.
And when you talk about you had similar issues medically, what specifically are you talking about?
I was very young. I was 26, 27 when I had to have a hysterectomy, and so did the defendant.
Okay. So you had both had hysterectomies at a young age.
Correct.
At the time that you met the defendant, was Hannah already in her life as her daughter?
Yes.
So you didn't know Tammi Smith at the time that Hannah participated or first became involved in their life?
No.
You indicated you talked about those similarities, those medical similarities. How else did your friendship grow?
At one point, it was May of 2008, May or June, that my mother had decided to come down to move from Oregon to Arizona, and found out that Jack, her husband, had his real estate license. And so that's really where it kind of accelerated the relationship, the friendship, because then we spent more time not just at the office, but then it was spent at my home, at her home, researching homes, getting prepared for my mom to come down. We would go drive around neighborhoods, looking at homes, looking on the computer at the RMLS. So at that point it turned, more from just meeting, as her client, but then meeting personally at her home and my home.
And so other than the relationship that was established because of the real estate and the relationship that was established for the medical procedures, did you spend time with Tammi and her husband other than that?
Yes.
What types of things did you do together?
We went to dinner. They would come to our house. We would go to their house. We would go swimming. The kids would go with us to their home. We would, she would make enchiladas and salsa. They would come to our place. We would go out to eat. We used to, if she had time in between clients, she would call me and say, hey, what are you doing? Meet me at Paradise Bakery. We would go grab a coffee, grab lunch. We would go to Babo's.
And during these occasions, when you spent time with her, would her husband Jack be there?
Occasionally.
And would your husband Sam be there?
Occasionally.
Were there times that you spent time with the defendant without either of your husbands present?
Yes.
Did you ever talk to the defendant on the phone about personal matters?
Yeah, we talked on the phone all the time.
Did you communicate in any other ways, such as MySpace, Facebook, text messages?
Yeah, no, just that's how we communicated. Mainly it was talking. We would text occasionally.
But mostly you talk on the phone?
Correct.
You indicated that you had similarities as far as the hysterectomy. Did the defendant ever talk to you about the hysterectomy and her ability to have children?
Just obviously the fact that she couldn't have children.
And did she ever talk to you about her desire to have children?
Yes, she expressed that they wanted to have another sibling for Hannah.
And about what time period after you had met her did she start talking about wanting to have another sibling?
Right away.
The first
Actually,
visit?
I would say probably within the first 2 or 3 visits. When she had went on her trip to Africa, she had even talked about adopting in Africa, adopting children.
And so she started talking to you about the possibility of adoption.
Correct.
What conversations did you have with her in regard to adoption?
at the beginning, it was just, more of her talking about her wanting a sibling for Hannah. And when I would be around, Hannah would even say, that she wanted a brother or a sister.
And did you specifically talk about any ideas that the defendant had in regard to adopting a child?
Can you clarify? I don't.
Did she talk to you about any plans she had to adopt a child?
No, at that time she hadn't specifically had plans. I mean, she had talked about like artificial insemination, a surrogacy, issues like that, things that had come up.
Your Honor, at this point, I'm going to object, move to strike relevancy.
Overruled.
And DeeAnn, if you could tell us what your conversations with the defendant were in regard to surrogacy.
Objection. Relevance.
Overruled. You can answer the question.
Tammy had talked about finding a woman to carry a baby for her. At one point in time, she even asked about having my husband's.
Objection, Your Honor. She answered the question, Your Honor, and I'm concerned that there should be more of a question and answer than a narrative.
So the objection is narrative. I think under the circumstances sustained, let's go question and answer. So try and make sure you just answer the question right in front of you.
Okay.
And leave it at that. Go ahead, Ms. Andrews.
And Your Honor, I'm afraid my question was pretty open-ended about that subject. So
Try and close it down a little bit if you would.
I will try and do so without also being leading.
I understand the potential difficulty.
DeeAnn, you indicated that there was a conversation about your husband.
Yes.
What was that conversation?
That Tammi Smith, thought that he had nice skin coloring and wanted his sperm
And what
to use as a surrogate, for a surrogate.
What specifically did she say to you about using his sperm?
She said, wouldn't it be nice if we had inseminated Sam's sperm into a surrogate, and if the surrogate wound up having twins, we could each have one.
And what was your reaction to that?
I was just like, what? And I just I laughed. I was just like, oh, yeah. I mean, I couldn't believe kind of what I was hearing, because this was very early in our relationship. So I didn't really know how to take it. I mean, I kind of just tried to blow it off.
Did you respond to her about her idea of using Sam's sperm?
I just kind of laughed. I mean, I didn't really say much of anything. I was kind of in shock. I mean, a person comes out and says that I want your husband's sperm. It was shocking.
Did that end your friendship?
No.
Now, without saying anything that you specifically said or that he specifically said to you, did you discuss that conversation with your husband, Sam?
Yes, I did.
Other than the conversation about using Sam's sperm for surrogacy, did the defendant talk to you about other ideas regarding surrogacy?
At that particular time, no, it was just, she was always talking about wanting to have another baby, finding somebody to have a baby for her because she couldn't carry her own baby. She started talking about, looking into adoption more.
And other than the conversation you had with her about Sam's sperm and insemination, did you have conversations with Tammi Smith regarding insemination involving other people?
Yes, in 2009.
Tell us about the first conversation you had with the defendant about insemination in 2009.
Tammi had told me that she had a client.
Objection, Your Honor. I'm concerned where we're going, Your Honor.
I think we're okay. So I'm not hearing anything that I'm going to sustain, so it's overruled. Go ahead. Why don't you ask the question again?
You could tell us what that first conversation was in 2009 about insemination.
That she had found some a person, a female, that was willing to be inseminated by Tammy in order to carry a baby to give to Tammy.
Objection, Your Honor. I think this goes.
I think we're going to the point where we shouldn't go. I'm sustaining the objection in terms of talking about specifics.
Then move to strike the last sentence, Your Honor.
Why don't we counsel approach briefly? Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm striking the last answer that the witness gave from the record. You're not to consider that answer for any purpose. So we're going to ask a new question. Ms. Andrews, go ahead.
DeeAnn, without talking about any people in particular who may have participated in any activities with Tammy, you talk about what she told you about her desire to participate in insemination. Let me re-ask that. That's not a good question. Let's actually move from there and we'll go back to that later. How about that? At some point in time, did Tammi Smith talk to you about Elizabeth Johnson?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately when that was?
It would have been around June of 2009.
And at that point in time, what did Tammy tell you about Elizabeth Johnson?
Just that she had met somebody and a girl with a baby in an airport that she was hoping to get the baby. It was a quick conversation. I mean, it was nothing elaborate.
Now, you indicated that she was hoping to get the baby. What specifically did she say about that baby?
She said that she had exchanged information with the girl and told her if she wanted to adopt her baby out, to call her.
And after that meeting, did you hear from the defendant about Elizabeth Johnson or that baby at all between that time in June and early December of 2009?
No.
Did the defendant ever talk to you about that girl again after that conversation before early December?
No.
During that time period, did the defendant talk to you about another adoption?
Yes.
And what did she tell you about that other adoption?
That she had met a person at a Jack in the Box restaurant who was pregnant, and she approached the person, and somehow it came about that the next thing I knew, they were talking about, getting papers drawn up that this woman was pregnant, and that she was planning to adopt her baby. And she was going to doctor's appointments, taking the woman to doctor's appointments, and taking her to the attorney is my understanding, so that they could get the adoption papers for when the baby was born.
And do you recall about what time frame this was happening?
Around, I would say November-ish, because it was just before. There was almost an overlap between that baby and the next issue.
Okay. And the next issue, what are you referring to the next issue?
When she called me in December and said, and I specifically remember she called me from the grocery store and said, we've got a baby boy. And I was confused because I knew that the Jack in the Box lady she wasn't getting close to being, she was close, but not that close. So I was like, what do you mean you have a baby? And she said, remember that girl that I met in the airport? And I'm like, and at that point I was like, kind of. And she goes, well, she called me and I've got her baby. I've got a baby. And they were in the grocery store. I could hear him. She was holding him. And they were in the grocery store because she had nothing. She literally, I guess, just got a phone call basically and went and picked the baby up.
So let's go back a little bit. You received a phone call from the defendant, and you indicated what time frame was that?
When she got Gabriel?
What time frame do you recall?
That was in December.
Okay. And
early December.
you indicated that her first statement was, "We have a baby."
Mm-hmm.
Did she? Is that a yes?
Yes. Sorry.
Did she tell you where she was at the time she was calling you?
At the grocery store.
Okay. And did she tell you why she was at the grocery store?
Because they had no diapers, they had no formula or no food. I mean, nothing for a baby. So she had picked him up and they went straight to the grocery store.
Now, at the time when she first called, did you think she was talking about the other baby?
I was confused because I didn't know. But then she clarified. She's like, said, it's the girl that I met at the store. And I remember even saying, well, what about the other baby? And she's like, well, we'll have 2 babies. I was like, oh, okay.
So, did you have any more conversation with her at that particular time about that baby that she'd just gotten?
No, I mean, she was at the store. She was excited to call and tell me that, she had gotten what she wanted. She got a baby.
Did she tell you anything at that particular time about the circumstances and how she got that baby?
No, that particular phone call was fairly short because, she had just picked him up. She was excited about having him, but they were in the grocery store. I could hear people around. I could hear stuff going on in the store. They were in the grocery store.
And at the time you got that call, were you in the Phoenix area?
Yes.
Did you have any conversations with the defendant after that particular call about the baby she got from the woman in the airport?
Yeah, as time went on, days went by, yeah, I did.
And did she tell you what that baby's name was?
Gabriel Johnson.
And what's the next conversation you remember having with the defendant about Gabriel Johnson?
I asked her, about the papers because I wanted to, I was concerned that something would go wrong because she had been trying to get a baby or, having a baby for so long. And this just kind of seemed to me almost too good to be true, that a girl would just dump a baby off on you. And so I started questioning her about, is the father going to sign the papers? What if she changes her mind?
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered, narrative.
It's also, I think, technically hearsay as well, sustained.
You said that you asked her specifically about papers.
Correct.
What did she tell you in response to your concern about papers?
That the mother and the father were both on board with the adoption and that there wasn't a problem.
During this conversation, did you talk any more about the circumstances behind the adoption or the paperwork or anything else? In this particular conversation, did you have any more conversation with her about the paperwork or the circumstances of the adoption?
No, it was very straightforward about that.
Do you recall any more conversations after that about Gabriel Johnson and the adoption?
At the beginning, no, there was not much talk about
But after this, did you talk to the defendant about Gabriel Johnson?
Yeah, as soon as it became clear that the father was not on board.
Objection, Your Honor. Non-responsive, she answered a question that wasn't asked of her. And it also calls for speculation, unless more foundation is laid.
In this context, overruled. Go ahead.
What did the defendant tell you about the father not being on board?
That he was not going to sign the papers, the adoption papers.
And what did the defendant tell you she was going to do about that?
That she was going to help Elizabeth figure a way out to make sure that he signed those papers.
Did she tell you the name of the father?
Yes.
What was the name she told you?
Logan McQueary.
And did she describe Logan to you at all?
Yeah.
How did she talk about Logan when she talked to you?
That he wasn't a nice person, that he was abusive, that he was into drugs and alcohol, he couldn't hold down a job.
Did she tell you how she knew this information?
From Elizabeth.
Did the defendant talk to you about Elizabeth?
Yes.
What did she tell you about Elizabeth?
That she was had come from a bad upbringing. She had gotten involved with Logan, who was not a good person to her, and she was basically, like a victim.
Did the defendant ever express concern to you about Elizabeth harming Gabriel Johnson?
No.
Did she ever express concern to you about Elizabeth harming herself?
No.
During the conversations you were having with the defendant about Gabriel Johnson, did the defendant talk to you about Elizabeth Johnson moving?
Yes.
What did the defendant tell you about that?
That if she could move to Tennessee and change jurisdiction, it would help delay the process for Logan to get Gabriel.
And what did she say that would do if it would delay the process?
She was hoping that if they got to Tennessee and they were far enough away and it was long enough that the jurisdiction would change and that he would, one, give up trying to get the baby, or two, the courts in Tennessee would say, no, the baby's been living in Tennessee, this is where the baby lives, this is where he belongs, you're out of luck.
And did the defendant talk to you about why they were specifically discussing Tennessee?
Jack and Tammy are from Tennessee. They have friends, family. They have ties to the community.
Did the defendant talk to you about anybody she had contacted in Tennessee?
An attorney, Janet Morris.
And did she specifically refer to where Janet Morris was located?
I believe it's Nashville.
Did the defendant talk to you about any research she had done in regard to changing jurisdictions?
Yes.
And you mentioned jurisdictions. Whose word was that?
Tammy's.
Okay, and changing jurisdictions, whose phrase was that?
Tammy's.
And what did she tell you about the research she had done in regard to Tennessee?
Just that if they changed jurisdiction, it would get Elizabeth and the baby out of Maricopa County, and it would get them over there so that anything going on here wouldn't be valid because they wouldn't live here. They wanted to get her there so that it would make it difficult for Logan to, one, travel because he didn't work or have a steady job or anything, and it would just be very difficult for him to continue trying to fight to get custody of the baby Gabriel.
Did the defendant ever talk to you about Elizabeth Johnson living with the defendant?
Yes.
What did she tell you about that?
She had actually researched adopting Elizabeth.
And what would that do for her?
Because if she adopted Elizabeth, then she would get to have baby Gabriel in her home.
At some point in time, did you have a conversation with Tammi Smith about specific court proceedings?
Yes.
Tell us what you remember from that conversation.
She was at the courthouse with Elizabeth, and she called me from the car, and she said, and I was driving, I remember specifically, she's like, hey, I'm here at the courthouse with Elizabeth and filling out the paperwork for the paternity issues with Elizabeth and Logan. And I want to put a bunch of different names down because the more names we have on the paternity affidavit, the longer it will take, for them to get through the list, basically. And she asked if she could put my husband's name on that document.
And what was your reaction to that?
Absolutely not.
And did she explain to you, other than what you've already described, the purpose of putting other names on the document?
Just so that it would create confusion for the courts, so it would give them more time, it would buy more time, basically, to stall him.
And why is it that she said she needed more time?
Because she was trying to figure out a way so that she could adopt the baby.
What did she tell you about why she wanted to get more time?
Overruled with that question. Go ahead.
Can you ask the question again?
What specifically did the defendant tell you about wanting to get more time?
So that she could adopt the baby, so that they could continue to research and talk to attorneys, check into changing jurisdiction, trying to buy more time.
At some point in time, did you have any conversation with the defendant about Logan having any custody rights to Gabriel?
Yes, at one of the hearings, she did say that he got custody of Gabriel.
At some point in time, did you learn that Elizabeth Johnson had left the state with Gabriel?
Yes, she called and told me.
And the conversation you had with the defendant about Logan getting custody, do you recall if that was before or after you learned Elizabeth left the state?
Before.
The conversations that you had with, well, let me ask you this. At some point in time, did the defendant call you and tell you that Elizabeth had said she killed Gabriel?
Yes.
The conversations that you had with the defendant about changing jurisdiction in Tennessee, were they before or after the conversation you had where she told you Elizabeth said she killed Gabriel?
Before.
At the point in time that the defendant called you about Elizabeth Johnson saying she had killed Gabriel, what was the defendant's reaction to that?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Let me ask it better. What did the defendant, how was her demeanor when she was telling you about Elizabeth Johnson's statements about what she had done to Gabriel?
She was upset. She was distraught. She was crying.
And did she indicate to you whether or not she believed that Elizabeth Johnson had actually killed Gabriel?
She did not believe that she would do that.
And did you have any conversations with the defendant after you learned that Elizabeth said she killed Gabriel about the defendant's desire to adopt Gabriel?
Yes.
And what types of things did you talk about in those conversations?
Well, she was still hoping, obviously, that he was found and that he would be brought back to Arizona and that they would get custody of him.
So did the defendant express a desire to have Gabriel return home?
Yes, to her.
Now, at some point in time, did you contact the Tempe Police Department about this case?
Yes.
What was the reason you contacted them?
When the information came out on TV that Craig Cherry's name was written down, and I saw Tammi on TV telling reporters that she didn't know how that had gotten on there. And at that point, I knew how it got on there because she had called and asked me for my husband's name to be put on there.
And when you called the Tempe Police Department, did you call a regular line, an anonymous line, or what type of line did you call?
I'm not sure what line it was. It was the number, I believe, that was on the internet or on the television. And I believe it was an anonymous tip line.
And when you called that line, did you talk to a person or leave a message?
I believe I left a message at first.
And when you left the message, did you leave your name?
No.
Did you leave your contact information?
No.
Did you hear from the Tempe Police Department anyway?
Yes, I did.
Did that surprise you?
Yes, it did.
Why did it surprise you?
Because it said it was an anonymous tip line, and then all of a sudden, I'm getting a phone call from the police.
Now, we had originally talked at the beginning that you and Tammi were friends and you didn't know a whole lot of people in the Phoenix area. At some point in time, did your communication with the defendant lessen?
Yes, we had different time periods where we talked more and different time periods where we talked less.
And during this incident with Gabriel Johnson, did your communication with her change?
After she asked for my husband's name to be put on the paternity document, we didn't really talk. I mean, at that point, I was not thrilled with her for wanting to involve me and my husband in illegal documents.
And, you know, I didn't ask you this. I asked you in regard to another subject, but without telling me what you said or what he may have said to you, did you discuss that conversation about using his name on court paperwork with your husband?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, at this time, it's probably a good time to take the lunch break.
Okay, well, I'll take that suggestion. So we're going to take our lunch break. We will come back at 1:30. Until then, remember the admonition, and we'll see you at 1:30.
All rise.
Okay, please be seated, everyone. You can step down. You don't have to stay up here. Okay, we're outside the presence of the jury. We have a couple items we need to talk about. Let me clarify sustaining the objection and striking the statement from the record. The reason that I sustained Ms. Phillips' objection and struck Ms. Ayala's answer is that the answer essentially could be interpreted to suggest that Ms. Smith herself was participating in an insemination procedure. And I thought it was pretty clear that if I was going to keep out some discussion of it occurring in her office or at her home, I would also keep out any testimony regarding her in some way participating in an insemination procedure. And so the answer essentially suggested that she would participate. You can't ask, and you, to your credit, withdrew it after that when you asked about participation, because I wrote it down. There's no way to ask that question without eliciting testimony that I found to be excluded under Rule 403. So we moved on from there, and that's the reason that I sustained the objection, struck the answer, because I didn't want there to be any suggestion that there was some kind of participation by Ms. Smith. I believe Ms. Phillips wants to make a motion based on that testimony. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Why don't
Thank
you
you.
go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, at this time, defense moves for a mistrial. I believe that the information that the jury has now heard is cause for mistrial. It explicitly went against the court's ruling that Ms. Ayala could not get into, and the court instructed Ms. Ayala, as well as the state, that Ms. Ayala could not get into any information about artificial insemination in Ms. Smith's office. Now, Ms. Ayala did not say the word office or the word home. That's true, technically. I suppose she was following your ruling. However, by her saying that Tammi had talked to a patient, had started talking to a patient in response to the question about artificial insemination, Your Honor, implies patient, office, or home where Tammi works. There'd already been all the foundation, how Ms. Ayala had met Ms. Smith, that she had met her at the medical office, had participated with her professionally. She went to Tammi for treatments. There's all that testimony in there that Tammi works in an office and sees patients in an office. The jury has now heard this. The jury is going to assume that this particular patient with whom Tammy had a discussion was about artificial insemination. It goes directly against the court's ruling and the court's concern that this violates Rule 403. The prejudice clearly outweighs any probative value. I know the court has struck the answer, but Your Honor, you can't unring the bell on something like that. It is really highly charged testimony. It's highly prejudicial, and for those reasons, Your Honor, I believe that information is in their minds. They're not going to forget it, and I move for mistrial.
Okay, two things. Number one, in the world of violating my orders, 403 type orders, this one doesn't cross the line as significantly as virtually every one that I've seen. I don't think there was intent by Ms. Andrews. It was along the edges of what my ruling was, and I don't think Ms. Ayala intentionally stepped across a line either. I think the use of the language was unfortunate to make a suggestion that Ms. Smith may have participated in some way in some kind of insemination procedure, and that's what I wanted to keep out, along with any suggestion that one was contemplated to have occurred or did occur at her home or at the office. So we don't have an egregious violation. Most importantly, I think for purposes of prejudice to the jury, I think under these circumstances, it's minimal and doesn't support a mistrial. I don't think that in light of the testimony that did come in, that hearing the language the jury heard and then having that language struck is going to create a level of prejudice that anywhere near approaches what I would consider to be necessary to cause a mistrial. I don't think that the jury can leap to conclusions as far as you would think that they would go. And I don't think that the area of testimony is so prejudicial that it affects Ms. Smith's right to a fair trial under the circumstances. And so I'm denying the motion for that reason. For me, it's not really close to the line from my perspective. And you may.
Your Honor, thank you. Your Honor, my concern is not only is this type of testimony prejudicial, tabloidish, sensational, if you will, it also suggests criminal activity that perhaps if Ms. Smith, if the jury were to believe that Ms. Smith were doing this kind of activity in her office, they know she's not a licensed physician. So the jury could assume that she was committing criminal behavior in her office, either medical malpractice, practicing medicine without a license, those types of things. So beyond just the argument of it being of a sensational nature, Your Honor, I would argue that it also implies she was committing criminal activity. And that's, I think, where the prejudice really lies.
I think the jury's really got to stretch to get there, to get to criminal activity. That's a stretch. And the jury now knows that it's got nothing to do with this case. I've struck it. And so I don't think it so clearly suggests that to the jury. Ms. Andrews, any record you want to make?
Your Honor, no, I think the court made the record. The reason I wanted Ms. Ayala advised on the record about what she could and couldn't testify is essentially this. I don't think she testified to what she was advised not to, but I do understand the concern about what she testified and how the court's previous ruling affects that. I think we need to make it clear to Ms. Ayala that any testimony that puts the defendant, Ms. Smith, involved in the insemination herself is what we're trying to get away from. And I just want to make sure that that's clear on the record for any future testimony she does in this case. I don't think she did it intentionally. That's why she clarified with the court, can I testify about insemination? I think she understood that she could not talk about it being in the home or in the office. And there was no testimony in this case that the defendant has a home office. That was my mistake when we discussed it outside the presence of the jury. In fact, the testimony...
Do we need to talk about? We've got potentially some direct left. I'd prefer it if we stay off the insemination issue completely, but I'll leave it to you to ask appropriate questions going forward, but I'm not sure how a foray there isn't going to be potentially fraught with some difficulties, and then we'll get into cross-examination. I want to come back and make sure you're back at 1:25 so I can have a discussion about Detective Hutchins, because I want to think about what I want to do with respect to his testimony. As I understand it, he's going to be next. I think. Is he going to be next?
That was our intention, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So be prepared to discuss Detective Hutchins at 1:25, and then we'll come back at 1:30. Anything else we need to talk about?
Your Honor, we did want to talk about the testimony regarding the laying the foundation for the GPS device. I'd like to talk about it sooner than later because we have to make certain travel arrangements, but if we wanted to take that up this afternoon, that would be fine. I just wanted to make sure I let the court know we discussed that.
Let's take that up this afternoon. Remind me to take it up this afternoon. Ms. Phillips?
Your Honor, I wanted to ask the court then for a limiting instruction regarding Mrs. Ayala's testimony.
What I will do, I'm not going to give the limiting instruction now. I am open to a proposed final instruction that limits. I'm not sure what I do with it as I sit here today, whether I think it warrants some kind of limiting instruction, but I'll certainly consider it. So submit it, I'll consider it, we can discuss it if I'm inclined to give it, and we'll see where that goes.
Thank you.
All right, anything else? All right, I hear silence, so that means we'll be back at 1:30. Okay, we're back on the record in Ms. Smith's case. She's here. The attorneys are here. We are not in the presence of the jury. I want to come back and talk about is it Detective Hutchins? Is it?
Yes.
Okay, Detective Hutchins' testimony. Before he testifies, I'm a little concerned about how long that might take as I've thought about it and what I need to hear to make a determination.
If it is the court, Your Honor, we actually have several other witnesses that we can call this afternoon, and we did let him go in anticipation of giving us further opportunity to fully research the issue for the court.
I think that's a very good decision. I appreciate that. So you know, for that issue, I'm going to need to know something more from both of you. From the state, I need an explanation of what you expect him to say in terms of statements that Ms. Smith allegedly made. And then, Ms. Phillips, I'm going to need from you to understand why the context would be so important for cross-examination. That is, based on what he's saying, why your inability or presumed inability to question him regarding his status as the examiner for the polygraph would prevent you from effectively cross-examining him, because I think I understand that to be the main argument.
Yes,
I'll need to know why that context is so important. That's what I'm looking for. I think there's some cases maybe around the edges that we can also talk about at that time, but this gives us more time to resolve this issue, and I think it's good that we don't have to do it now. So, what else do we need to talk about before we start again this afternoon? We're going to continue with, I think, the direct examination of Ms. Ayala at this point, and then cross, and then who are we going to call next?
Detective Larson, Your Honor.
Okay. And we're going to end by 3:30 today, because we're going to have any argument necessary on the state's motion to quash the subpoena of the state's motion, the motion filed on behalf of Judge McVeigh by the Attorney General's office to quash the subpoena, or in the alternative motion for protective order regarding Judge McVeigh's testimony. And then we can talk about any other issues also at that time. Anything from the state's perspective we need to talk about before we start?
No, Your Honor.
How about from the defense perspective?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, so I think we're ready. I think Kim was rounding up the jury, so sit tight. I think she was getting them from outside and should be bringing them in. So once she's got them in, I'll tell her to put them in. I'm going to step off, and then as soon as we have them, we'll get going. And Ms. Andrews, you may proceed.
Your Honor, I actually have no more questions for direct and pass the witness for cross.
Okay, thank you. Cross-examination. Ms. Phillips.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Ayala.
Hello.
Now, you indicated in your testimony that you and Tammi had some discussion about jurisdiction.
Correct.
And that conversation took place prior to, as far as you know, prior to Elizabeth Johnson leaving the state of Arizona.
Yes.
Now, you contacted the Tempe Police Department after you heard that Elizabeth had left the state.
Yes.
With Gabriel.
Yes.
And you left an anonymous one message, right?
Yes.
On their tip line.
Yes.
And you did not leave your name, correct?
No.
And you did not leave your number?
No.
So you were surprised when Tempe Police contacted you?
Yes.
And was it Detective Ramirez that contacted you? Do you remember?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And she obviously had gotten your name, right?
Yes.
You have to answer audibly. So yes, she had gotten your name.
Yes.
And she'd gotten your phone number.
Yes.
And she had gotten that information from Tammy.
Yes.
Now, if I can direct your attention to your testimony about Tammy calling you and asking you to use your husband's name on the paternity documents.
Yes.
You stated that she called you, and you remember it very clearly, right?
Yes.
And it's your belief that she was calling from the courthouse.
She said she was at the courthouse, yes.
Okay. And it was the time she was helping Elizabeth fill out the documents, was your understanding?
Yes.
And your thoughts were something like, I can just imagine what Sam's ex-wife would say.
Yes.
And that's because you've been involved in your own custody fight with kids, right?
With my own kids? I have...
With Sam, Sam's ex-wife.
Well, that would be Sam's custody issue.
Okay. You were married to Sam at the time of all of this?
Yes.
December 2009, January 2010?
Correct.
Okay. And you're still married to Sam?
Correct.
Okay. And Tammy told you that the reason for putting Sam's name on the document was to buy more time, I believe is what you said this morning.
That is one of the things that she did say, yes.
Okay. And she wanted to buy more time because she wanted Logan to have to take a DNA test. Wasn't that part of it?
She wanted multiple people to take a DNA test. She wanted other people to be first.
And the reason she told you that she wanted people to have to take a DNA test because Elizabeth had told her there was another potential father.
Correct.
And Tammy told you that Elizabeth was afraid to put the real man's name on the document because it was Logan's best friend.
That conversation, I do not believe happened at that particular time. That conversation was prior to this one.
Okay, but it did happen.
Yes,
And
because
that's
it
your
was
recollection.
Logan's best friend.
Okay.
But that conversation did not happen on this particular date.
Do you remember when it did happen?
Within that week before her going to court, when she knew that Logan was not cooperating with the adoption.
Okay, and she also had given you information that it was her belief, that Logan had been abusive to Elizabeth.
Yes.
And had stolen money from Elizabeth?
I don't recall that, possibly.
It's possible she said that.
It's possible.
And that Logan had been mean to Elizabeth.
Yes.
Now, you never met Elizabeth Johnson, right?
Correct.
And you never spoke to her on the phone?
Correct.
So you never talked to her?
No, I did not.
And you had never met Logan?
No, I have.
And you've never
not.
spoken to Logan?
No, I have not.
But you did know Tammy really well, didn't you?
Yeah.
Quite well. And you said that you had met her in 2008, right? And that your friendship developed very quickly.
It did.
And you met her at this medical clinic where your doctor was located.
Yes, my naturopathic doctor introduced me to her.
And you first started seeing her in a professional capacity.
Correct.
Okay. And then you discovered that you had a lot in common with her. And you'd not been in Arizona. Again, I'm sorry, you need to answer audibly for our court reporter.
No. Correct. Can you repeat the question?
Sure. I just said you found that you had a lot in common with her.
Yes.
And you had not been in Arizona very long at that point.
Correct.
I believe you said about 6 months.
Correct.
And she was pretty much one of your only friends at that point.
One of a few, yes.
And in fact, you said she was a person that I had connected with. Do you remember saying that?
Yes.
You were very good friends with her,
Yes.
and she befriended you.
Yes.
And you were always hanging out or talking or doing something.
Yes.
And so can I assume you probably pretty much discussed everything with her? Like kid stuff,
Yes. Kids, family.
husbands,
Yes.
talked all the time.
We talked frequently. I mean, there were times that we talked quite a bit, and then there were times we didn't talk very much if she was busy working, and then I wound up moving to Montana for 6 months, and we didn't talk. I was busy.
Okay. At one point, you were talking to her like every day.
Yes.
And you visited their home,
Yes.
and they visited your home.
Yes.
Okay. And you even babysat Hannah for her a couple of times.
Yes.
And you went out as couples.
Yes.
And they came to your house.
Yes.
And you shared meals.
Yes.
And the kids would go swimming.
Yes.
All that family stuff.
Yes.
Right? Went out to dinner.
Yes.
Went to happy hours.
Possibly.
You'd go
We went to
shopping with
dinner.
her. I'm sorry?
I said dinner.
Okay.
Yes.
And you'd go shopping with her.
I don't recall ever going shopping.
Okay. Lunch?
Yes.
Okay. And at some point, they even bought you a car, didn't they, when you could not afford one?
No.
She gave you some free medical services for hydrotherapy?
No. I have checks and
Okay,
receipts.
I'm sorry. Answer the question. How long would you say this went on for, the close part of your relationship? How long a period of time?
Spring of '08 until December, the end of '08, because I moved to Montana on January 1st. So that was the main period of our relationship. After that, even when she came back, or when I came back, she and I didn't really hang out or communicate that much after I moved back.
Okay, and when did you come back from Montana?
June of '09.
Okay, right about the time that she told you she had met Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Okay. And
It
so
was in that same time frame.
Okay. And she told you that she had met Elizabeth, or a woman, in an airport.
Correct.
And she told you this during one of your telephone conversations with her?
Correct.
And you sort of brushed it off, didn't you?
Yeah.
In fact, you thought, this sounds like another Tammy thing.
Yep.
And so you forgot all about it.
Correct.
And so from June of 2009, after you got back from Montana, till about December 2009, it's your opinion that Tammy was off to other ways of trying to find babies.
Correct.
And you heard no more about Elizabeth from Tammy for about 6 months?
Correct.
And during one of your many conversations with her, she had confided in you that she always wanted more children.
Yes. That was from the beginning.
And she told you, and we heard about this morning, many other attempts that she had made to adopt a child.
Yes.
And then about 6 months after she had told you she had met Elizabeth, she called you and she said, "We have a baby."
Yeah.
Okay, and you told us quite a bit about that conversation this morning, right? And in fact, she sounded really happy, didn't she?
Yes.
She sounded ecstatic, was your word.
Yes.
Okay, and she called you because you were best friends and she wanted to share happy news with you.
Correct.
She kept saying, "We've got a baby, we've got a baby," right?
Yeah.
And she said, and you said, what do you mean you have a baby?
Yes.
Okay. And so she then explained to you that it was the woman in the airport whose baby it was, right?
Yes.
And that she had decided to give up her baby for adoption.
Yes.
Okay, and she was actually calling you from the grocery store, you said?
Yes.
Yeah, because she had gone straight to the store when she got the baby.
Correct.
Because she was picking up things for the baby.
Correct.
Diapers,
Correct.
formula,
Yes.
other baby stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And she actually had Gabriel with her, didn't she?
Yes.
You could hear him over the phone.
Yes.
And you could hear him sort of jabbering away
Yes.
happily. Yeah, nothing further, Judge.
Thank you. Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. DeeAnn, on cross-examination, defense counsel was asking you about Tammy telling you she wanted to have multiple people do DNA testing to buy more time, and you said that's one of the things she said. What are the other things she said about that, having different people on the paternity document?
Well, one, so that the more people that they had on listed that could be a potential father would create somewhat of a chaos within the court system. If you put down one or two, it's pretty easy. You take this guy and that guy and that's it. But she wanted to put down multiple people so that it would take up and tie up time, because I guess DNA testing, it's not just like you get the results overnight.
Objection, Your Honor. Move to strike that last part of the answer. There's no basis for her to make that statement. She'd already answered the question. It's beyond the scope of her knowledge.
Well, I don't know how far beyond the scope of her knowledge. I think she's relating fairly the conversation as she understood it. So the objection's overruled.
And did Tammi Smith indicate any other reasons to you why she might want to put other names on the court document?
Because their other potential father was Logan's best friend.
And Logan's best friend is not Sam, your husband?
Correct. He is not.
Defense counsel asked you about a statement you had made when you referred to Tammy calling up and telling you that she had met a girl in the airport, and you referred to it as a Tammy thing. Explain to us what you meant by a Tammy thing.
Tammy, from the time I met her, talked about wanting to have another baby. She talked about different ways of getting babies. She looked online about having a baby. She put postings online to get a baby. She met people, went up to pregnant people in airports. She went up
Objection,
to...
Your Honor. Objection, Your Honor.
We're now outside the scope, I think, in terms of what she just said.
Your Honor, I'm asking her to describe what she meant by the Tammy thing. And that was a statement defense counsel asked her. She's describing what she means by a Tammy thing.
But what she's saying is outside what she said with her direct with respect to going up to pregnant people in airports, that statement. And so I think we're going now beyond what she testified to in direct and was fairly asked in cross with that statement. And the broad nature of the question has brought that out. And so we need to limit that, because once we start testifying via narrative, we have issues. So why don't you go ahead and narrow it, understanding that there might be a little lead that we have to give you leeway on, if necessary.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, I'm not sure how I can ask her to describe the statement she made when defense counsel asked her without her doing it in a narrative fashion. It's her description.
Okay, well, and we risk me striking portions of her testimony if she's going outside. So you can ask her and we'll just go down that road.
Well, at the time that you felt it was a Tammy thing, what was your reaction to her conversation about meeting Elizabeth in the airport?
I really didn't pay much attention to it because it just seemed like another attempt of having a baby or getting a baby.
Was there a time at any point during the Gabriel Johnson situation where you stopped thinking of it as a Tammy thing?
Can you clarify the question?
I mean, did your position about everything that you talked to Tammy about, did you still consider it a Tammy thing?
Yes.
And how is it that you considered it a Tammy thing? What makes it a Tammy thing?
Because it was obsessed behavior over trying to get a baby.
No further questions, thank you.
Thank you. Does the jury have any questions for Ms. Ayala before we let her go? Doesn't look like it. May this witness be excused, Ms. Andrews? Ms. Phillips?
No objection.
Okay, you may step down. Thank you. Be careful stepping down. And the state may call its next witness.
Detective David Larson.
Okay, let's get Detective Larson.